Welcome to the Paddock Pub Podcast, F1 Podcast, the inaugural episode. I'm Rob Colosia, and this is Gareth Maden. How you doing, G?
Doing good today.
All right. So the basic concept of the podcast is that this is the Paddock Pub. You can see behind us, that's the original Paddock Pub from Silverstone. Basically, every F1 race has a pub, at least it did in the old days, in the middle of the paddock. So after everybody was done wrenching at the end of a Thursday or a Friday and even Saturday, everybody would bombard the pub to have a couple pints. You'd have everybody there from owners like Eddie Jordan to team principals to the pit crew and the drivers. You'd also have media in there, and you'd also have people that were employees. Guys that were security guards are in there hoisting down a couple of pints as well. So you never know what the conversations were going to lead to. It wasn't just what's happening on the track and the normal stuff that you hear on TV all the time. It was also everything off the track. People talking about business and marketing and wives and girlfriends and all the other drama involved, money and everything you could even imagine, as well as all the stuff that's on the track and happening, and as well as talking about personalities and talking crap about other people. It was all happening in the pub like any other normal pub. And so that's what the whole concept of the Paddock Pub Podcast is going to be about. We're going to try to have different takes than what you normally get from other places. And we're also here to try to help entertain as well as educate, as well as talk about history as well. Anyway, Rob Colosia, I'm from Group C Sports Law. I've been involved in all areas of sports law for the last 30 years, including F1. I was the pit fireman for McLaren in 1991 at Phoenix. I had my racing license. I've done a lot of sports marketing, a lot of auto racing marketing, as well as driver contracts. And with us is Gareth.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you, mate.
Sorry, I'm
falling asleep over there.
Overwhelmed by your list of achievements. No, I'm.
Oh, thank you.
I have a technical background in development and all that kind of good stuff. Loved racing from being a small boy growing up in England, idolizing Nigel Mansell and hoping that he can beat Senna and Prost on whatever given Sunday we're dealing with. So
as well as a very large sports marketing background as well.
Sure.
So that's another thing we're going to have a lot of talk about, a lot of business aspects of the sport, and get into all of that. So that being said, inaugural episode. The other thing is about this show is it's going to be brief. We're going to keep all of these fairly short, so don't feel like you're ever going to miss anything. You're going to be able to easily drop in, drop out, and really enjoy it and experience some different takes. And I think in our inaugural episode, we're going to have some takes that are a little bit different than everybody's anyway. So let's take a look at what happened this past off season of 23-24 winter. And let's switch on over to that right now. All right. So our first topic today is in the pole position. Is going to be the news about Lewis Hamilton bolting from Mercedes and going over to Ferrari for next season. So this creates this season to be what I like to call awkward. It's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic going on with both Lewis at Mercedes and Carlos Sainz, who's now lost his seat at Ferrari. What do you think, G?
You know, this is one of the things that's always been a kind of an interesting thing with Formula One, as opposed to almost any other sport out there, that you can declare your movement significantly before you've terminated your previous employment. So, I mean, are drivers going to drive at 100% for their new owner? Excuse me, for their old owner? Are they going to go out and help their future owners? I mean, you hope from a professionalism standpoint, which, you know,
that's an interesting point.
Lewis has in spades, you know, but still, there's got to be some amount of tension. It's kind of like going to date tell the new girlfriend you're going to date her in a couple of months, but you're going to keep dating the old girlfriend and let her know. I can't imagine going to Sunday lunch with my future ex-girlfriend's parents and having to have a conversation about what's going on in the world. So
I think that's definitely the point for Hamilton. since, you know, he's the one saying it's not you, it's me, right? As opposed to Ferrari saying, well, it's kind of you, Carlos. See you later. So, which brings up what's going to happen with Carlos. I think that Carlos now, he's looking for a seat. He needs a ride next year. So
Right.
it's going to really light a fire under his ass. I think we're going to see him singing Smooth Operator a lot more often this year than just the one win that he had last year. I think we're going to see him be extremely motivated to get himself a new ride for next year.
Yeah,
And
and
on
see,
that line, now's probably a good time to point out what you just brought up about how different F1 is than other sports. The silly season, look, we had no change last year. There were 0 seats changed. I think that's the first time it's ever happened. And so next year, that means a lot of people's contracts are going to be expiring because most contracts are short, 1, 2 years, 3 years. Most people don't get extended contracts in F1. And what's interesting about F1 is that the silly season doesn't start in the off season like every other hot stove sport. It's going to start like in July, June, maybe this year.
right.
So you're going to start seeing dominoes fall into place. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen in Mercedes, as well as what'll happen in Red Bull, which will be a topic for a whole nother episode of another podcast episode. Anyway, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, you know, they talk about, you know, playing the game of who's not going to get a seat. Well, maybe everybody just shuffles. Is the worst guy in Formula One better than the pretenders that are looking to make the team? So
It's going to be an interesting musical chairs, that's for sure. The other thing that's interesting is on the topic, because I'm going to throw a little sports law in here. On the topic of future contracts, pre-contracting actually came about in the mid-70s with a football player named Bill Bergey, who was a linebacker for the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was his lawsuit that enabled teams to start pre-contracting with players who were still under contract with their existing club. And before that, you could never have that in any sport, let alone with F1. That being said, I think it's time to move along. All right, front row. Next topic, my favorite current meme out there, Drive to Survive, the Google version. Christian Horner. Horny Horner.
hey, that's my line.
Sorry, man, you gotta go with that. So people are all aware of it by now, I'm sure, by the time this thing's going live, that Christian Horner had some sexual advances, claims against him, was suspended by the team under a team investigation. They came back, nothing happened, which then in turn promptly somebody leaked the alleged text messages from him and this employee, which are on there, but I intentionally keep them small because we do not want to, we do not have quite the budget of the Daily Mirror to be posting the various Sunday paper style rumors. But it is interesting. What's your take on this, G?
Well, first of all, it was to be expected, as I have, you know, pointed out, that all the Spice Girls get cheated on at some point in their life. You know, Sporty Spice and Posh Spice and Ginger Spice, and you know, maybe it's not spicy enough for him. So it blows me away that somebody as diminutive and as ugly as Christian Horner scores himself a Spice Girl, that he doesn't stay with his Spice Girl and decides to go for the new girl on the block. But you know,
It's crazy because he's got young kids. and they have that historic estate with horses, as
Oh,
all of us
great
have seen
life.
on Drive to Survive, not the Google version.
Great life. But what,
Crazy.
what is it about
Crazy.
men having two heads, but only enough blood to think with one at a time?
It's also going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with the team.
Right.
Because even prior to this first race, Max's dad, Jose, came out and said, has already been critical about Christian. So it'll be interesting to see, does this implode everything that Red Bull has going on?
Well, it's a giant power struggle,
Yeah.
and is it about the driver or is it about the team principal and who has the power to do what? Well, for the longest time it's been Christian with the power, but as he weakened his power base by screwing up. So, and obviously by what we've seen, Joss isn't allowed on the track this weekend, and whether that's come from Christian, or I would assume it's come from Christian, that seems like Christian still has the power, at least for now. More stuff comes out and the public opinion starts, weighing in for him, and Mike Starch keeps winning more races and makes potential overtures about going somewhere else, that maybe at some point you've got to pick the driver that
And let's not
wins as much.
forget, Red Bull is a big corporation. They're board of their own, plus you have the additional overseeing of actual Red Bull above it.
Right.
It's going to
Right.
be interesting to see what happens, especially if and when this comes down to litigation or something, because obviously there was not some sort of settlement with her since these all got leaked. So it seems as though there's definitely stuff that's going to be coming down the pipe. And we'll have another episode on that, I have a feeling, because this seems to be going down the legal aspect at some point.
Right. Right. I mean, the one thing that, that Ginger Spice knows how to do is play the PR game, and it was obvious that they tried to create a contrived, everything's fine under the water.
Yeah,
The
when she
last
showed up
round,
at practice, right, holding
yeah,
his hand.
making out on the grid and making sure the cameras are there to capture it and all that stuff. That was so contrived. But
Yeah,
at some point, she's not going to put up with the BS that's if he's really done what he's done. So we'll see what happens with that.
right. All right. Now let's move on to the back markers. Stuff that happened this off season that is a bit of a problem. Andretti's got denied their joint application with Cadillac, which is GM. And I saw a quote there that said that that Michael said that the F1 think that they're a bunch of hillbillies. And their response was, we do not believe that the applicant would be a competitive participant, which is really crazy to think, considering how well Andretti Motorsport has done in all of their different endeavors in Indy and Indy Next.
It's about money. And it's about slicing the pie up. And an 11th slice of the pie is 1/10 of a slice of a pie, not going to all the other teams.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. We'll always follow the money when on any of these type of things. And that's a 10% decrease to the rest of the teams.
The question is, do you grow the whole pie by bringing such an iconic name like the Andretti's into the biggest market in the world, which you covet, that you suddenly hadn't had a Grand Prix until recently for the longest time, and then suddenly you've got, cities like Las Vegas selling their soul.
Yeah.
So.
But we're going to talk a little bit more about that stuff in a second here. The other thing, DNF, Gunther Steiner out. Popular Drive to Survive star Gunther.
I'm waiting for him to appear in Playgirl.
Let's talk about what the rumor was on that, which I think is very fascinating, is how apparently Gunther had a sponsor for 20 million that wanted to come on board, but they wanted an ownership stake included. They wanted some
Interesting.
points. And apparently Haas did not want that. And that was what blew up the relationship finally once and for all.
Well, coming in last a whole bunch isn't good for the relationship with the owners to start with. I mean, he's from a performance standpoint, and this is a performance business, you know, his results were very poor, although he was great for TV ratings. He's a, you know, he was definitely a character on the grid, and he was great for Drive to Survive, which, by the way, is the greatest marketing move in any sport in the last 20 years on TV.
Yeah.
He'll come out of this smelling of roses, and he'll find himself a new spot because he's burned himself a space in the media world of Formula One, even though he may not be a team principal anymore. He's somebody who
you gotta, I'd be shocked if they don't just hire him to be like a Will Buxton, right? I mean, on Drive to Survive. How do you not have him
stand next to Martin Brundle and make smart-ass comments all the time on the grid? You know, that's who he is.
I think they got to hire him just to be on there to talk smack about people the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is off the track government issues. So, first and foremost, let's start with Singapore on the right. Apparently, they're under investigation having to do with a minister who was involved in a corruption scandal.
What a shock.
And it's fallen to down to the Grand Prix as well. However, since the initial disclosure about it came out in stories that, you know, there's been F1 has come back and said this isn't going to have any effect whatsoever on the race itself. So
because
it's about money.
There you go.
Something I think we should point out to a lot of our American fans that are watching is that F1 does not actually throw all of these races. They throw the actual race, meaning they fly around the planet with all of their teams and they set things up and whatnot. However, the actual promoters, there are individual promoters at each site that are paying upwards of 40 million to have the race. So they pay a royalty fee. They're in charge of getting everything sorted out and sorting out the track and all that and having it ready. But when they land with their 10 teams, should be 11, and get on with the race and have it done. But meanwhile, don't forget, there's an individual promoter trying to make a profit, which is why we saw such crazy prices in Miami and in Las Vegas to make up for it. So at the end of the day, F1 really doesn't care if there's a scandal and people did a bunch of graft, because as long as they get their 40 million, we're going to be racing under the lights at Singapore.
Right.
All right, now let's talk about Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. It was reported that the mayor came out and said that apparently the contract wasn't actually all approved and signed off on. And so there may be a glitch coming into next year. Now, is this Vegas posturing, or is this Vegas basically saying, hey, we got our hand out, we want some more money? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think somebody somewhere, probably in government, because it's the kind of dumb decision government makes, overestimated what Vegas could actually do. You know, it's a great idea that people are going to fly in and pay $2,500 for a ticket for a race. Are 50,000 people going to fly in and pay $2,500 for a ticket? I don't think so.
Right.
The idea is Vegas promotion has always been, what do we bring? What can we bring people to an event that's affordable that they can then spend their money in the casinos? That's always been, whether it's the boxing game or the MMA game, or, you know, now we're going to actual sports with, you know, the Raiders and coming soon, the Oakland A's moving to Vegas. It was a poorly thought out plan from somebody from a marketing background, a really poorly thought out plan. And the people of Vegas gave up a lot of, with the disruptions for such a large amount of time that disrupted the operations of the whole of Vegas, that maybe it's not worth what they put into it.
Yeah.
It was a great race and it looked great and it was a great background and it's a wet dream for a Formula One fan.
The other interesting thing, G, is there's no pre-races. There was no other race. There wasn't F2, F3, F4. It wasn't GT races or IMSA or anything like that. There wasn't even a celebrity race.
Right.
It was just the F1. That was it.
Because you can't close the track. You can't close the city down for the races that don't really matter.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Now, the thing about the Vegas is, that F1 and the promoter are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they get this race to come back again. Because as you can see on the graphic, they released their income recently, 25% increase in income up to 3.2 billion and a 64% increase in profit, 400 million of profit for Liberty Media. Amazing. Huge numbers, and a lot of that is attributed to Vegas. So obviously they're going to do whatever they can to overcome whatever problems the mayor has.
Yet they don't want to have the most iconic name in American history of racing as part of the team honors. I don't get that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I just don't see it, other than it's just money. And I think at some point they're going to realize that's going to be an additional revenue stream. So we're going to need it at that point, because that's when I think the Liberty Media corporatism is going to step in, because they're going to say, we need a new bounce. All right. That being said, we like to end every episode with some history of F1. And this one is going to be a blend of, and this is great because it's going to be new news to Gareth, who doesn't know that this was on the agenda.
There we go.
The Ferrari retirement team. Ferrari bringing in Lewis, who's already how many years and how old is he now? Apparently, so I said, let's take a look at this. Ferrari has done this 7 times in the past, where they've brought in a racer who's been already in the league for at least 6 years. And they're trying to catch some lightning in a bottle. So on the left side, you'll see on the chart, they've 4 times have they signed previous champions who are veterans, older veterans. So we've got Alain Prost, who was a 10-year pro at that point and a 3-time champion. And in 1990, he only finished second with Ferrari. That was his best result. Now, then there's the Michael Schumacher, who they got after 6 years, 2-time champion coming in, and he won 5 times with them. That's the lightning in the bottle they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did it. They tried it again with Alonso and Raikkonen together on there, who's on the right side. That's the first time they've ever had 2 former champions on one team. So that was in 2014, and they had both of them in there, and neither of them won. They finished second and third. Fernando only got up to seconds. And then the other world champion they hired, previous world champion, was Sebastian Vettel, 8 years in. And he had won 4 times previously with Red Bull. The best he ever got was 2 seconds. Now, they also went out and hired some veterans that were not previous champions, and it worked for them the first time. Back in 79, they hired Jody Scheckter, who was in his 7th year, who previously had only finished 3rd, and he won the championship.
Mm-hmm.
Then they tried it with Nigel Mansell, who paired with Prost back in 90, and that was a complete, utter shit show disaster. So
thank you. I was wondering what phrase you were going to use to describe that.
I think shit show disaster is
Shit show disaster.
I think it's shit show disaster even in Italian. You know, I think they were saying losing a lot. Okay, that's what I envisioned. There's a lot of bad words in Italian being thrown that year. That it was a complete disaster. The best they did was second and fourth. And then the last but not least, we go back to Raikkonen, which was a really weird situation where they brought him in twice. They brought him in once at his 7th year, where he had previously only been second, and he won the title with them. And then they waited, he left, he went 5 years away, came back, and this time as a prior world champion, and he paired up with, like I said, as more or less a second. He paired up with Vettel, and he ended up third. So, and he paired up with Alonso as well. But at that point, he'd already really kind of seen himself as the second seat, and they treated it that way. But it just didn't work. So, there you go. The question is, what's going to happen with Hamilton? This is obviously their MO, and Ferrari's going to go for it.
Next year.
Next year. Correct. Next year. This year,
Followed by a year of having
operator.
dinner with the ex's
They
parents.
still have this. They'll still have the smooth operator who's definitely going to push it, trying to find himself another ride. The last thing he wants to do is have a complete disaster and end up at Haas. Yeah, I said it.
Okay.
That being the case, hope everybody enjoyed this episode of the Paddock Pub. Let's go ahead and shift back over to the immersion into the Paddock Pub itself. We'll see you on the next one. The next episode is going to be our liveries and helmets special for the upcoming season. Thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe down below and tell your friends. And if you have any questions, you can hit us up below, or you can follow us on Twitter at Paddock Pub F1, or Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now called X, or something stupid like that. That's what happens when you're one of the most richest people in the world. You can do dumb things. That being said, see y'all later.